morning everybody, and welcome to today's tutorial. We will be showing you how to stitch these panels onto your Hoffman Dream Big Rose panel. It's quite easy to do. It's a little bit of a different technique called reverse quilting that we will be doing on this panel. We've decided on the rose window to use with the rose panel. I think it's quite fitting and it gives a beautiful effect. Every design is something different, as you can see there. As I turn it, it's quite interesting to stitch even these circles at the top. Every design has a different element. Very easy to make, but let me walk you through the steps of getting these panels done. We will not be doing a full quilt in this. I'm just showing you how to stitch these panels. If you want, you can block them, frame them on your wall, or use them as a center panel on your quilt. So whatever you want to use them for. They make beautiful tote bags as well, even jackets. If you want to make a jacket using this, it can be quite a striking garment. So the possibilities after you stitch this is endless. Let's get started. Now, first of all, you need your panel, of course, in the color scheme that you want to do. You will need some stabilizer. Now, in my first block that I've done, just grab them again. In this one I've used batting. Now this is just a thin polyester quilter's batting, needle punch batting that I've used with this one, and I've used black cotton fabric with my panel on top. With this one you don't need any stabilizer, as your batting is your stabilizer in this case. For the second example, I decided I'm going to use just a piece of fleece fabric that I had in stock, just to see what the effect would be. So by all means you can use fleece as well. So this was just the second example, and in this third example we are not going to use any batting or fleece. I'm just going to use normal stabilizer so that we can see the difference between the three methods and what materials we used. So you'll need your stabilizer that you're going to use. So that would be either batting, either fleece, or cutaway, whatever stabilizer you want to use. I would not recommend a tearaway, of course. You need something that will keep your front everything intact while we're stitching. Then you need your top fabric that we're going to overlay. I'm not going to add a bottom fabric at this stage, but if you want your back to be finished at the same time, just remember to match your bobbin thread, and then you will add your back fabric at the same time. So at the back here, you add your back fabric, you add your rose, and then you add your top fabric on top of that. So, but I'm not going to do that because I am going to block mine, so I don't need the back fabric. So I'm just going to overlay my top. Now I've decided on with the previous two examples I've shown you, I've used dark fabric, and you can see that the dark fabric brings out the purples quite well in this example. But on the cream, if you look at this example, the black is quite overwhelming and coming forward quite a bit. So I thought on this third example that I'm doing, that I will try and use maybe a lighter shade of fabric to see what the difference would be, so that I experiment and you can decide whatever fabric you like the best and what to use. So on this third one I decided to use a light yellowish mustardy color. The color that I chose to use for this panel is this color that is the lightest shade in my that I can see on the rose. But by all means you can use any color of your preference. You can even use a contrast fabric, like maybe a green or something. So whatever you decide to use, it's totally up to you. There's not a right or a wrong way with this. So just decide on what you like. On your thread color, if you want the quilting to stand out quite a bit, then you need to use a contrast thread. On this panel, I've used a little bit of a darker thread than what my panel is, so the quilting really shows up very well. But it's not that dark that it hides the rose. The rose still shows as well, so this was quite a win-win for me on this panel. As you can see, let me just open it fully for you. As you can see in this one, you can really see the quilting, but you can also see the rose coming forward. So this is one option. If you want the rose to come forth a little bit more and the quilting to be just in the background, then use a lighter color. Like in this example, I've used a very light color thread. I'll just bring it up close so you can see. So the thread color is very light, and you don't see that. It's almost like you have to stare at a bit longer to see all the various elements in the design. You will see that each panel of the design, and I'm going to show you on this darker one, it's easier to see, is something different. Here's a crown, here's a deer, books, leaves. So I really got a lot of elements. Each of these is something different. And then even on these circles, you can see they are all a different design, giving a lot of interest to this design and making you stare at it for a very long time. So let's get started on this panel and I'll show you all the steps. But first, let's see what you will need. We'll first need to mark it out. So of course you need your stabilizer, your panel all washed and dried in the tumble dryer, preferably so that it shrinks however it wants to shrink. And then you need your top fabric that I will be using, your bottom fabric if you are going to use that, the thread color that you chose to use on your panel. I'm going to use this gold color that's similar to my fabric, and I decided I'm going to use that throughout the quilt, so I'm not going to use a different color for the quilting. It's all going to be the same color, so let's see how this comes out. You then need a measure tape and a marking pencil. Now I'm using this marker by Prim. It uses lead, and I've got a nice dark color lead on here as I am going to be writing on the lighter fabric. And then you need your quilting rulers, various quilting rulers. You need something that can measure angles, so I have this round ruler that can do 30 degrees, 15 degrees, whatever angle you want on this ruler. It's quite handy. But remember, your longer rulers also have these 45, 30 and 60 markings on. So you can use that. Or if you want, you can use the ruler that we've included for you in the zip file. If you look at the zip file, there's a folder called rulers. And in that you will find DXF and SVG files. Now we've cut this ruler from acrylic on the laser machine, but by all means you can cut this from cardboard as well. You can even just make a paper template, as just so that you have the different markings and you can mark it out on your fabric. This makes it a lot easier than working with your rulers, but we will show you how to do it on the rulers as well. So let's get started on doing our panel. First of all, you're going to take your stabilizer. Now, whether you're using the batting or the fleece or this cutaway, use 505 spray and just baste your panel to your stabilizer. Remember to first mark the center of your design. Now, I've just folded my fabric in half and in half again to find my center, and I've marked it there, and I've also marked it on the back of my stabilizer. So right there at the back, I made a little mark where the center of my panel is. So after you've done that, we're ready to add the top fabric. Now, as this is a reversed applique, it will all make sense in a little bit while we are layering or covering the rows actually. So it will make sense in a moment, I promise. Now I'm going to take my top fabric and I'm going to place it right side facing up over my panel. I'm just going to turn it, as my fabric is a bit on the long side that way. Then I'm going to pull back this fabric a little bit and I'm going to add some 505 spray. And I want you to be liberal with your 505 to ensure that nothing moves. And without stretching the top fabric, just push it down. I do recommend that you use cotton fabric, as the panel itself is also cotton. If you start using different types of fabric, you might run into them stretching in different ways while being stitched, and that might create some puckers, etc. So please, as this is 100% cotton panel, try and use 100% cotton for your top fabric as well. I'm spraying on top of the rows here, just removing all these fuzzies. And then just gently, without stretching the fabric, bring it down and smoothing it out. Okay, now I need to mark my center again on this one, and as I have measured, marked it from the back, I can just bring that marking to the front now. I'm just pushing a pin through. And I'm just going to take my pencil and mark my center. I can now remove the pin. Now from the center, we need to mark the sides. Now if you have ironed your panel, you would know where your side markings are. Now I've just marked them there, so I'm just going to bring that mark through to my top fabric. And I'll do the same on the bottom and the top here. It's where I ironed the rose panel. And you can now draw that line, and to make sure that I am at a nice 90-degree angle, I'm just going to use another ruler, place it side by side, line it up with these two markings and the center. And then I'm going to draw this horizontal line, making sure it's nice and dark. There you go. And from that line we can basically get started on drawing. So if you're using a normal ruler or the circular ruler, I'm placing the center on top of my center line, and I'm making sure the horizontal is lined up to that horizontal. And I now can draw in the 90-degree angle, and I can draw that line. I can also go ahead and draw this 60-degree inside the holes there. There's a 60 there, and then you can draw that line. And you will rotate it every 60 degrees and draw in the 60-degree lines. And after that, you can then use your 60-degree angles that you've done and divide them by 2 again. Now, it's very easy. Even if you don't have the circular ruler, you can use your regular rulers. You've got your 60, your 45, and your 30 there. So I'm just lining it up, my 30 degrees. With the horizontal line there, and I can draw in my 45 there, over there. So this would be a 30-degree angle that you will be doing. And then to find your 15, you will just measure from there. You will measure half of it, and that will be your 15 mark. And then you can draw all these lines in on top of it. Will look like a little spider web that you're drawing in. Very easy to do. So every 15 degrees you will have a line. I do urge you, however, to print our ruler that we have made for you. Like I say, even if you print it on paper, you can still use it. It doesn't need to be on the plastic. It's just such a handy tool to have that I urge you to print it on something a little bit more sturdy, or cut it from something sturdy so that you can use it again and again. Now, these markings here that I've got on the ruler here, let me just put the piece of black behind it so you can see. Now, these markings are 15, 15, 15 degrees every time. And then on the ruler, the long piece of the ruler, as you can see here, we've got little slots in there. This marks the center as well, so you can use that also to create longer lines. So you will line up these small notches with your degree angles, and you can see that you can actually mark your line throughout. But I'll show you in a moment exactly how that works. Then these longer slots we will use to create our circles. Now, each of these have a purpose. That's why they are in a specific area to show where the different pieces of panels goes in, where they start, where they end, so that you can keep them all nice and evenly spaced. I'm going to use my ruler to show you how this works exactly. If you're using a plastic one like I do, we added a little piece there for you so that you can add a weight on top. And I'm going to line up the sides of my ruler. I'm going to line that up with the marking that I made onto my fabric. I'm just going to mark this a little bit darker. And now I can mark this center as well. I can use my ruler to make that line longer for myself. So I'm lining it up, and I'm just drawing in. So there you can see all the markings that goes up. I can do the same at the bottom, so I can again line up my center there. And then line up with those markings that you made on top there to make sure that it's nice and straight that way. And lining up my ruler towards the bottom as well. This ensures that everything is nice and perpendicular to each other. and I can draw in these markings. Now I've got a center line that I can draw in. The marking out takes a little bit of time, but I promise you it gives perfect results if done correctly. So I urge you to really take the time and do your markings properly. Now I'm again going to line up this part, and I'm going to add my weight on top. And I'm going to use these 15-degree angles, and I'm just going to draw them in through the ruler. Very easy. All marked out, and we can now join the lines. So I'm just going to use the markings on this side and use them on that side, as well as my center point, and I'm just going to lengthen them. And I might do the top first. Just going to tape these two rulers together to form a longer ruler. Here we got all our center lines all drawn in. And now we're going to use this longer piece of the ruler to draw in the different circles. Our first smallest circle that we're going to draw will be where this outline needs to stop. Then the second one is to show where we begin this one and where it needs to end. Then there will be one to line up these points, one to line up those points, etc. That is just so that you have your placement every time outward at the same manner, so that you don't end up with some of these panels going in and the other one out and all wonky. So that's why it's very important that we draw in these smaller circles as well. So I'm placing the template that I've included for you on top again, and I'm using the long ruler, and you'll see there are slots, long slots in here, and I'm going to insert my pencil. Now this pencil won't fit in there, so I'm just going to use the other one. So I hope you can see this on camera. And I'm going to use a weight on top of here. Now if you're using a paper template, just make a short line, move it over to the next line, move it over to the next line, and then it doesn't need to be round. You can take a ruler and just connect those lines if you wish to do so. So it's not necessary to draw a circle as such. It just makes it easier. If you have a hard plastic template like this one, to just move the pencil around to draw that line for you. Making sure that I will be able to see it when I stitch. So make it dark enough. Moved, so I just need to redraw that one. Making sure everything is straight. Let me see if I can sharpen this darker. Then for the center circle, I've got measurements for you as well. For those of you who don't have any rulers or don't wish to use the ruler that we have included, I've got a list of measurements where you can just draw your lines. So you basically divide it in 4, and then you can draw in all your diagonal lines. So you take this line and that line, divide it by 2, do the center, then divide again, divide again, divide again until you get all the diameter lines in. And then from the middle, your first one is 74 2.5 millimeters or 2.93 inches. So from your center, you can mark at 74.5. So I'm just going to mark. This is just to show you that you can use the ruler as well with the measurements that I gave you, should you rather wish to do that way. So it really depends on whatever you want to use. Okay, so I'm going to complete that all around. You've got all your measurements. You can see, just bring it up closer. There's all your different measurements. And we are basically ready now to take it to the embroidery machine and start stitching. So I'll be back. Let me just draw in that line quickly, and then I'll show you how we're going to add this onto your embroidery machine. We are now ready to start stitching the panel on the machine, and I've already loaded the design onto my machine, and I'm going to use my magnetic hoop. Now this is just a metal hoop with magnets that attach, so I don't need to use any stabilizer. If you're using a normal hoop where you need to press the two hoops together, I would suggest that you hoop water-soluble Vilene, because we don't want any bulk off to it. So hoop one layer of soluble, and then you will just use fiberglass spray and float the quilt on top. So do not press it in the hoop, as it will distort the shapes and make it very difficult for you to line up. Okay, let's bring our quilt over. Now you can see on my hoop I've got the center markings on the sides, on the top and on the bottom. You can't see the top as it's behind the head of the machine, but those are my lines that I'm going to use to line up my panel in the hoop. So I'm basically taking my whole panel and just pushing it under the machine over the hoop, bringing the center of the quilt to the center of my hoop. Now you can roll up your quilt if you would like to make it a little bit easier for you. Now, as a guide, I know that my machine is in the middle of my hoop at the moment. If you look at what needle is lined up with your center. So my number 2 needle is at the moment lined up. So I'm just more or less just moving my center point to that needle, just for me to keep it a little bit in place while I finish all my measurements, or my lining up rather. So I'm just taking a pin at the moment and I'm pushing it through the center at the top, through the quilt, and you'll see that when I do it at the bottom now. And then I'm going to lift and look underneath and see that I line up the pin with the center marking of my hoop. And then I'm taking one of my magnets and I'm just placing that magnet in place there. Now I'm going to do the bottom. So here you will be able to see, so I'm using the line that goes straight down here, pushing my pin in through the quilt, and I'm just going to roll this up so you can see nicely what I'm doing. And there's my pin and there's my mark. So I'm just moving the pin over so that it lines up. Bringing this down and then adding my magnet on top. Now I know that my quilt is aligned that way. You can just double check for the center if this one is corresponding, and yes, that's fine. So if these 3 are correct, then the other one will be fine as well. And I then can use the rest of my magnets to secure it. You will need your applique scissors. I'm using these Froley scissors with the curved handle. They cut really nice and close to the stitches, but any favorite scissors of yours. And you can use nice and sharp tweezers just to lift up. Then to just cut the top fabric, I'm just using a utility knife, or in my case I've got a scalpel, a hospital scalpel that I'm using. The scalpel, you can normally buy from your pharmacy, but we will have links in for, like I said previously, for everything we use. We will have links in the description for you, where you can purchase whatever you like, if you like to use the same that we do. The scalpel is very handy, especially just to nick the top fabric. You don't want to nick the quilt itself. So now I'm going to just line up the center of my design to the middle. So you're going to place your fabric in place, and now we're going to use our printed templates to perfectly align it. Now, included in your zip file, you will find a PDF folder with all your printed templates. And if you look, this is what your templates look like. It's got the red crosshairs, which we will use to line up with the markings on our in our hoop. So I'm first going to cut out these templates. More or less, it doesn't need to be perfect, just as close to the stitches there as possible, just to make it easier for me to see. Especially as the panels get more and more and more, you would like to see how they interact with one another. Just going to do this one for now, because we're going to start with this one. And as you can see, the red crosshairs there. So we are going to line up the top of the hoop, the bottom, and then the sides we're going to line up with the crosses on your, with all these lines. It might be a little bit difficult to see, but you got this one going straight up from the bottom, going all the way up, and then we've got the one that is making the 90-degree angle from the center. So you can just mark them for yourself a little bit darker, so you know where to line up these red lines. So I'm just placing it, and I'm going to make a little hole there in the center. Maybe use your pin if you like, just to make sure that you have your center line aligned there. But I'm just going to push my needle down in a second. So I'm first lining up the sides here, and that mark there, making sure that it is aligned at the back. And then I'm going to use some sticky tape to keep it in place. And the other side. That be enough. And I'm now going to move the machine over to where the center point is. Now, most of your machines will start automatically in the center. If it does not, or you need to move it slightly, it depends on what type of machine you've got, but you can just then shimmy it over to the center point. And when I'm happy, I just make one stitch to make sure it's in the middle. And then you can go ahead and stitch the first step of this design. So I'm just going to press start. And after this first step, I like to cut my fabric, the top layer now, but if you tend to not cut close enough to your stitches, then wait until the next step, which will be your zigzag. I prefer to stitch at this point, as I like to get as close as possible. So I'm just taking this scalpel, and I'm just nicking the top fabric without cutting the bottom fabric. I'm just basically making a hole. And then I'm going to use my scissors and cut, and make sure that I'm only cutting the top fabric and not the rose panel. And this fabric gets removed, and then we'll stitch the next step. And there you can see the center point where we marked our panel, so we know we are in the perfect spot. So now I can continue to stitch basically the rest of the design, which will be a zigzag stitch to finish off this raw edge, followed by a satin to finish it off neatly, and then followed by the quilting that goes in the center. So let's continue stitching the rest of this design. Our center panel is done, so we can remove it from the hook. I'll give you a nice close-up. You can see what that looks like. Isn't that gorgeous with the red and the gold? And we're ready to place our second piece. Now I've printed out my second template. Now this template we will repeat the full circle around. It's one of the very few that is just a repetitive design, just to get you started and on the go. So I'm going to first do the top one, but it doesn't really matter, you can do any one. I prefer to do the top, then the bottom, the top, then the bottom, then the left, then the right, and then I start the in-betweens. It's just so that the fabric shifts in all directions and you don't start to get movement in your design. So I'm going to use the top line. So this is our top line, our straight line up, and I'm going to line up my center. And now this is where these markings that we've done on the outer rim comes into effect. So if you look closely, you will see you've got 1, 2, 3 circular markings. So we're going to use the middle one and align that to the top of your design. So it's important that you basically trim the extra paper away there, so you can see your top of your design, and then line it up with your marking. So it's the first, the second one, the middle one, that you're going to line the top up there, and you're going to line it up with the bottom, and I'm going to tape that in place. So this line that goes through will align with your red line that's on your template. This line here will be the top of your design. And I'm just using some tape just to make sure it does not move. Now we're going to use this line and that line again to align it with your hoop markings. Now I'm going to use a pin again at the bottom. This is the line that goes through my design to the bottom. So I'm going to feel where my hoop is, press a pin through, and then bring it over. See where my pin is and align it with my marking there. And then I'm going to use my magnet to keep it in place. And I'm going to do the same at the top again. I'm now going to again align my center, and then we can press start and do the next step. Again, you can stitch the next step, which is your zigzag if you prefer. I prefer to cut at this stage, so I'm just making a little hole there so I can insert my scissors, taking a peek and making sure I'm not cutting the panel. And there's the next window opening, and you can now again continue to stitch the rest of the design. With this one all done, we're ready to do the next one. It goes fairly quickly, folks. It's really not very long stitching. We're now going to rotate the panel. I'm going to do the bottom now, but first I will place my template, as it's easier while it's nice and flat here. So I'm going to align again my top with the second one, and align my red line with this bottom. tape it in place, and I'm now going to rotate the panel in the hoop. But let me first show you what it looks like so far. I absolutely love these reds and yellows together. Makes me think of a sunrise window. So I absolutely love this effect. Okay, let me turn this quickly. So I'm going to do the top first this time. And aligning that in with the hoop. So I can just make a mark for myself. Feel where my hoop is. You'll see as your design grows, it becomes difficult, so you need to draw on top of your panel. So make just sure that you use a wash away pencil. So I'm going to need to move this over quite a bit. You can see there it's lining up my pin with the marking. This down again. I would suggest, if you do use a hoop on your single needle machine, use the biggest hoop that you have, so you have room, flat areas next to it. It just makes it a little bit easier to work with. Not to try and smash if you don't have a big hoop. You will just see that it will be a little bit more difficult to maneuver the design. It's always nicer when it lies flat. So even though the design is just a 4x4 or 5x5 design, just use your biggest hoop that you do have. And now we can again start stitching. And there's the next window. So I'm going to finish stitching this design, and then I'm going to go ahead and do this once on the sides, and then I'll do the two in between each of these. After this first row is done, I'll be back and I'll show you the placement of the next design. After you've finished all these inserts, we're ready to do our corners. And the corners are very easy to do, but because we don't have markings, we need to do a little bit of marking. So first of all, I want you to follow the line that came across. Let me just move the camera over a little bit. So from your center, just follow the line and try and just more or less draw a line so that you can see where straight edge is to start off with. Now I'm just using this quick marker. This is just a powder marker. It's also from Prim. It's got a little wheel, and then it's got some powder in a container there, which you can fill up. So I'm just drawing a temporary line there for using this, and I'm going to turn my quilt and do the same on this side. I'm going to try and line up the line at the top to make sure that I've got a nice 90-degree angle there. Remember folks, this is just a temporary line for now. It's just so we have something to start working with to get that corner in the perfect spot. I'm then going to, from this point, your center point of this panel, because you can see the center quite nicely, I'm going to mark that as well and bring that up to the top. Now as you can see, it doesn't quite get to my corner there, so it might be that I don't have this one quite straight. It might be that it's going outward a little bit, which is fine. We can use that as a new guide now. And I'm going to line it up on this midsection here, and I'm going to bring it towards the point. So my new line is going to go over there, but then I'm just going to make sure that when I put my ruler up there, that I do in fact sit with a 90-degree angle. If not, you would need to adjust that your top line a little bit. You would need to adjust that top line a little bit, or this one. It just depends. So maybe first draw this line, and then you can work your way outward from there. Because this is a 45-degree, you can even place your 45-degree angle onto that line then, like so. You see on my ruler I've got a 45-degree line, so I can line that up, and I can make sure that on this far end, in the middle of my panel, that I'm on that line, and I'm on this satin stitch at the top here, and then I know that would be a 45-degree there. So you can then make a mark, just to mark your top there, and you can do the same. So there's different ways you can actually measure this. I'm just going to turn my ruler now to do the other side. I'm again going to place the top of the ruler on that line, and the 45-degree I'm going to put on this diagonal line that I drew. I'm going to make sure that it meets the satin on this side, and then I can draw my marking there. This ensures that you have a nice 90-degree corner to line up your design. So you're now going to use this template, and I'm going to place it in the corner alongside the lines that I just drew, making sure that the point there and the line that goes through here is on my template lines as well. I'm going to take that down, so we've got that one perfectly in position. And then I just want to extend this line to the top, so I have something on my hoop to line up. So using the template center line here, I'm just lining up my ruler and then just drawing that line in. Now this line I can again match up to the center lines on the back of my hoop and see where my pin comes out and move it towards the center. You can see the center line of my hoop, and I've got my pin, and I'm aligning that, and I'm going to add a magnet to keep it in place. We're now ready to do the next part of our corner. Now I'm just looking at that spacing there, and I would like the same more or less spacing on this side. Now you can just eyeball it. It's really not necessary that you measure it, but if you are finicky and you want it perfect spacing, then just take a ruler, measure from your satin to your satin there, and then do the same width from there. I'm just eyeballing it, and I'm going to place my panel at, and I'm using the line that I drew in the beginning to line that up. And then again, I'm just going to, you can see the crosshairs run like this. So I'm just going to draw this line a bit longer. Just extending it to the top so I know where to line up at the back of the hoop. And I'm now turning the quilt so the horizontal and vertical lines run correctly according to my hoop. Back under the machine, and let's find that back center point. Now for the front, you do need a ruler. You won't be able to line it up otherwise because there's no center point on this side. So I'm just going to line up my ruler there on my template, the vertical line that goes down. I'm going to feel where the end of my hoop is, and I'm just going to draw a little line there. I'm then using my pin and pushing it through the line, and then I'll bring up my quilt to see that I lined that up with the bottom of the hoop. Almost spot on there, not very far off. And I can again attach a magnet. And let's put all our magnets in place again. After the first step, we can remove the top layer of fabric. And stitch the rest of the design. We are all done with this panel, folks, and you can now use it as a centerpiece on a quilt. We will be hanging this one on the wall, so it's going to be blocked with a frame. We will show you after we've done what it looks like. But yes, this is about 1.1 meters. It's the full panel. As you can see here, that's what's left of the panel. If I fold away the yellow. So it's fully stitched from side to side. I will now just give it a wash to remove all my pencil lines. And then we will put this over a block, the painter's block, and we're adding a frame afterwards. But I will show you as soon as I've finished this one fully blocked, fully framed, to show you what the end result looks like. I've also stitched this cream one, and with this cream one I thought I am actually going to cut off the corners, and I'll use the corners on something else. And then I want to make a tree skirt, a Christmas tree skirt with the full circle, so I will be cutting into it and adding binding around. But that as well, I will show you what that looks like after that is done. I thought this would make a lovely tree skirt. I would have loved to use the red, but the red is just so striking that I decided to rather use that on the wall than use this for the tree skirt. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's really very easy to make. It's called reversed applique onto your panel. And I'm sure I will see many of these panels pop up, and I can't wait to see your versions. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed it. Remember to join our YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button, and then also remember to click the little bell so that you are notified whenever we add a new video tutorial for you. Go back to our other videos. We have quite a bit of video tutorials that we've added over the years. You might find some interesting information in there, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again. Thank you so much for watching.